Hey everyone, hello again. I know it's only been 15 minutes since you last saw me, but I'm very happy to be back here with another exciting speaker. We have Courtny Cotten, Remote Design Team Lead at Microsoft.
Hey there, thanks for having me today.
I'm Lauren from arc.dev, a hiring platform that helps connect developers with remote opportunities. So let's kick this off. So instead of introducing Courtny myself, as you know we've done with our other talks, we're starting it off job interview style, so you can all learn how what a good elevator pitch looks like. So to the common interview question, how would you answer this question? Can you tell me about yourself, Courtny?
Thanks for teeing me up, Lauren. I'm Courtny Cotten, and I'm a professional design leader by day at Microsoft, and I moonlight as a coach in my spare time at Wabash College. And there are three basic things that I do. I kind of like to just make this really simple. I provide design vision for products. I collaborate with other people, and I help my coworkers with design frameworks or design solutions. I really enjoy jamming with folks on their own ideas. So very rarely is it me coming up with the one solution to solve everything. It's jamming with others and kind of being in a room together and how can you synthesize a great idea out of all those shared personalities and those shared ideas. At the moment, I'm working on all things design systems for Microsoft Developer Relations. Those properties include Microsoft Learn TV, startups, and Microsoft Documentation. And I'm located in Crawfordsville, Indiana, which is a tiny small town in a place that I nicknamed it Parts Unknown. It's the home of the Ultimate Warrior. So that's kind of our claim to fame. Small town Indiana. So that's it. That's me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here. I would like to start by asking you, how did you decide to pursue a remote design career? Like, when did you decide you wanted to do design? And also, when did you start working remotely?
So this goes back, this is such a big question because it goes back to when I was in grade school and I was the person that could draw a circle the best. So art was always my calling. It was I kind of attached to that and went with it all through grade school up until high school when I got exposed to, actually it was funny because I got exposed to PowerPoint and I would do graphics in PowerPoint and then Photoshop, and I got really heavily into video games. And I was like, how would you work on video games, right? Who makes these interfaces? Who designs them? What is that like? So I started to kind of peel back the layers and I realized really quickly that it was more in the realm of programming. And so I learned HTML and CSS. I really dived into that, started building websites in high school. I worked for a local newspaper business. This was in the age of the kind of digital transition of newspaper from print to digital. And my web skills came into play there. I was able to actually help the local newspaper convert everything digital. And that was an awesome experience. I got exposed to the print design industry. I got exposed to traditional type design and just all the elements of design from a really awesome mentor. There was a creative director there, an editor, and he kind of opened up my eyes to there's a career in this, you can do this. And as I mentioned, the web was very young and novel. There weren't a lot of resources out there at the time for this. And I think today there's so much out on the web to become a product designer, a web designer, a software developer. So I think it's more accessible than it ever has been, right? I don't think that you have to have a deep vested interest in it right now. You could start today from nothing and get a lot of free resources. Sorry, I'm a little bit congested from a cold. And so step by step, I got more and more into the design world. I went to school for visual design. And then years after college, I had the opportunity to work at a design agency who they were all remote, supposedly. So I was really uncertain about the gig. Was it going to be some sort of a contracting scam or something like that? So I really just fell into it. It wasn't hey, I want a remote job. Sorry.
No worries.
So yeah, I clear my throat with my Capri Sun there.
That drink.
the drink of champions. So yeah, pursuing a remote career was never my main objective. It was just kind of following where technology took me. And it took me to a agency that happened to be remote. And that first gig was it was a great learning experience, but it was also a really challenging learning experience because I was isolated heavily. I was younger in my career, so I'd served a stint at a place called Software Engineering Professionals as the only designer, and then I moved to an agency where I was a designer isolated in my own home. So mentorship and being guided as a young designer, those are like kind of critical and foundational things to, I think, your development. I didn't really have that as much, and I was in search of that. So I ended up at Stack Overflow, which was a remote first company. They knew how to do remote first very well. I would consider them kind of one of the innovators, along with Trello, in that space. And so I was able to kind of find a great niche, a great place to learn and become a better and stronger designer. So yeah, that's kind of my backstory there.
So then you ended up at Microsoft, which at that time, speaking of remote first companies, it was not a remote first company. I think, do you know like how did you end up working remotely at Microsoft? And at that time, was remote really uncommon within the company, or how many people were working remotely at that time?
So Microsoft, caveat here, was always one of my like dream companies to work for, right? It was always like kind of one of the top of my list, along with Google and Apple. As a designer, I thought it would be awesome to be able to work on Windows. It was something that had been a part of me since I was really young, like being exposed to Windows. So when that opportunity came, it was also like this realization that maybe I have to move to Redmond. Maybe I have to be in the office to really pursue my career. Fortunately, there are divisions within Microsoft that are very remote friendly. So developer relations is a division that serves all the developers worldwide that are using Microsoft technologies. This division in particular is on the forefront of kind of pushing the remote culture inside Microsoft. And so when I was approached for the job, I kind of learned that quickly, like, hey, you can still work remotely. We'd love to have you on a product team. So I jumped at it. I was like, yes, absolutely. Let's do this. And there's, like I said, there's pockets of that, I think, within Microsoft, different divisions within Microsoft. They're kind of tribal, but they have different managers that allow this kind of remote flexibility and this remote work. And I would say, like, to anybody that's looking at a job at Microsoft, chances are that team has thought about how they're going to go remote. I've only been here now like a year and a half, and I've already seen this great shift into the hybrid model of how they're supporting the employees, sending out equipment. This was something that was so bizarre to me, because coming from Stack Overflow, which was like a smaller, scrappy startup, older startup, but still scrappy, that did remote and distributed work so well, to Microsoft, who kind of, they fumbled at it. They didn't know, I didn't get my tech acquisitions until I went to Seattle to actually physically pick them up. There was no kind of office coordinator that manages the remote employees. Mm-hmm. And so now, as you can imagine, they've really propped that up and beefed it up. So I would say in just a year and a half's time, the shift has already been made at Microsoft, and there's going to be so many more roles, not only just product roles, but a lot of roles across different teams, and like opportunities within the teams themselves. So the application process, that was the network that I have was like a critically valuable part of that process. I had a former coworker at Stack Overflow who worked at Microsoft, and he said, hey, we have a position. We'd love for you to consider it. And in terms of that interview process, there were 3 kind of key phases. One was the initial phone screen, which is pretty standard. I mean, they ask you, like, are you a U.S. citizen? Like, kind of dig into your mind a little bit, make sure that you can talk the talk. And the secondary screening, which is more of you teasing out, like, what are they going to be able to give me as an employee? So benefits, how much are you going to get paid? Logistics, if you're going to kind of be relocated. And then the final step, which is the most interesting, was the Redmond onsite. So this was a new thing for me, because I had not interviewed in quite a while in an office setting. So it had all been remote. I'd interviewed remote twice before this job, which it's just so bizarre, because that's like it's like the land before time now, to go to Seattle, walk into a building without a mask, right? Like, just like a different world. And they flew me out there for 2 days of interviewing. It ended up being one really intense day. So they give you two just in case like people's schedules don't line up. But I was able to kind of get in there because everybody's schedules aligned. And the way they did the interview was really methodical. So you have 5 interview sessions. The first part of the day, like almost the first 3 hours, is just you talking about yourself. And you know this going in because they give you like a 1-pager, or it's not a 1-pager, it's like a 3-pager of like, here's what we're going to, the gauntlet that we're going to push you through. And it's funny because it didn't actually align perfectly with that, but it gets you really well prepared. Like you're like, all right, I'm fired up. I got everything ready. And this was like an opportunity. This is kind of where the authenticity and the storytelling comes in. I knew this was an opportunity to focus on telling my story and my backstory. I'm not from a tech hub, right? I feel like a country boy sometimes. Like I'm going to bring in an element of my coaching. So coaching is something that's really close to me and something that I've been very passionate about. And I coach track and field. So, fixating on that and telling the story of coaching and how, it's not just about processes and patterns and knowing the tech that I use for the different design projects I've worked on. It's more about keeping the story universal and relatable. How do the humans and the characters in that story work together to solve a design solution, right? Maybe you have like a really high energy project manager with really tight deadlines, and you have an engineer that wants everything tightly spec'd. But as a designer, you have to be the glue person between that. And can I tell that story of being like the person bridging the gap between these two and making sure that our vision comes to completion on time, and does it solve like a true customer problem? So there's even that aspect of people don't know what they don't know. And when you're working with other team members, sometimes you have to say, let's slow down and do some foundational research and understand deeply the customer problem and get that built into the pipeline. So those types of stories, like if I was to tell a designer, I've been interviewing designers and I've seen some of them kind of get fixated on like, well, we do like a double diamond approach and for discovery. And then we do like divergence and convergence. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Just like distill it down into like what you're doing. You're just working with humans. Can you tell me a success story about that? And I think that applies to really anybody that's trying to get a remote career. Can you talk deeply about that human experience of the team working together to solve a problem, and what was your part in that story?
So how do you draw this out of people? Like, since you also hire people remotely, do you have any favorite interview questions to really get to know the person that help you gauge that and get those stories?
Yeah, like I've been on both sides of the table now, and I have so many great peers. So I'm also going to say that I stand on the shoulders of giants. Like I have a network that is phenomenal. So both developers, software engineers, project managers, and designers that I've kind of culled this content set from. And it's interesting because some of these questions are designed to gauge, like, would the candidate be suitable in a remote environment? And the other ones are just like, they would be good in any like conversation set. And so my top 3 are really, the first one is, tell me about the person you've worked with who has had the single biggest impact on you. And that question alone, like I love to open up with that question because people, you can just see their demeanor change a lot. Like they kind of loosen up and they like to talk about maybe somebody else that impacted their career. And for me, I love seeing that gracious side of them. Can they talk about others and how they were impacted by them? How were they influenced by somebody else? What are the skills they picked up? Because that's what I want. I want somebody that will be able to collaborate and see the good in each other. Yeah. And we all have somebody that's kind of lifted us up and believed in us when we didn't 100% believe in it ourselves. So yeah, who is that person for you, Lauren, right? Like I would ask you that and you'd probably get excited. And for me, that was, I'm going to do a call out here. That was a woman named Kelly Wilson at my first job, Software Engineering Professionals. She believed in me and gave me like a big source of boost of confidence. And without that, like I would not be nearly where I'm at in my career. Like I wouldn't have had that belief in my own design strengths, right? So yeah, I love opening up with that and just kind of getting somebody loose. Because it's so much of it also is getting the interview candidate comfortable too. Like I want to know who they are as a human. I'm not here to grill you. I want to work with you, right? And so I want to get the stage set as best as I can and make you feel really comfortable. And that's just my style, like as a coach. For me to get the most out of my athletes, they have to be comfortable with me, number one. And then number two, they have to see that I have a vision for where they're going to go. And so that's the other side of this, which is, you know, number two is, what's the hardest non-technical problem you've had to solve at work? Can you tell me about that? And if they don't talk about working with other human beings, and then that's kind of a head scratcher, right? Like working with other people is the hardest part of, I feel like, my job most of the time. And this one is an easy one to learn about the candidate and how they discuss about teammates and past candidates. What's their level of emotional intelligence in communicating that to you? How do they present those scenarios? Is it kind of like a resentful and hateful, or is it like, you know what, I had a growth mindset from this and I moved forward in a way that I improved and my teammate improved, right? We're on the same team. Let's work towards a goal together. So I love that one because I can kind of sniff that out a little bit. And then my third one, and then I'll let you take it from here, but the third one is tell me about a favorite project you worked on. And again, people just get so stoked to talk about the things that they're passionate about, and they get excited, and you see the energy in the room just changes. And some of the best stories actually have been like not work projects. They've been things people talk to me about, like they did a bathroom renovation, right? Or they did something at home. Like those types of projects are cool to hear about too. So it's like they'll start with a work one and then they kind of bleed into like, oh, I also did these other things. And you start to learn about the person a lot more.
Yeah, great to get them excited about sharing something and hear their passions too.
Yeah, like I feel like that's a great way to get to know somebody during the interview process. And the more comfortable I can get you, the more authentic you're going to be. And when I did my interview at Microsoft, like I was not trying to be somebody I wasn't trying to fake it. Like I was just like, here's who I am. You either take it or leave it, right? And I think Steph in the talk before this made a great point. It was like, be on the lookout for new jobs while you have your job, because you have like a level of confidence. Like you're not dependent on getting this job. It's like you can go and walk into it with confidence and just be the person that you are and embrace your story and tell it in a way that's like, you know what, this is who I am. You got to accept it or not. You can either hire me or not. And I kind of love that feeling.
Yeah, I love that as an approach to life as well. I think that's a great tip. So if, say, for example, you have 50 amazing candidates that are all qualified, but you have to choose one, what's something that people can do to really stand out to you during their application and interview process?
I love it when somebody comes in and they know deeply maybe about the like area. Like sometimes it's hard on an in-house team to know exactly what you're going to be working on, but if you were to come into the developer relations team, like I would expect you to at least have a passing knowledge of like what developer relations is, what's Microsoft doing around its strategy. Just like, have you genuinely been curious about the role and the problem space that we're working in? It's always flattering when somebody's like, oh yeah, like I saw you do this talk, or they've done research about, maybe who the hiring manager is. I loved it. Like the last time I did an arc session, I had people reaching out to me and asking me for feedback on the resume and stuff. Like I'm totally open to that. I think there's so many great people on the internet right now that are doing that for others. They're giving back to the community. So like, yeah, did you do a little bit of legwork, right? Did you prepare for the role in a way that makes me get a sense that you really want it, right? You're not just throwing your resume to the wind and then hoping that we have a super strong interest in you. So that can make you stand out a lot. And then writing. So like, are they a good communicator? I think this one stands out like in a huge way to me for a remote worker. Are they answering my questions directly? Do they have a good way of breaking down their answers in a way that I can understand it? So not using like internal lingo from their previous company, really trying to help me understand where they're coming from. And then does it resonate with me? Like the subject that they're talking about in general. Are we on the same page in that term?
Yeah, I think that's a great point about just being able to explain things in like normal human words too. I think also, I feel like a lot of people may try too hard to use the fancy lingo and everything, but I think that takes takes away some of the authenticity of what they're saying as well.
And I think that I've been in interview sessions where the candidate goes maybe too long or too deep on like a very small topic. And this is another piece of advice. It's like, try not to fixate too long on something or show that it's like just, you only know this one aspect, because I'm sure that you're getting hung up on something, and I don't want to reduce you to just like one little tiny piece of your experience. I want to see the whole breadth. Like, who is this person? What have they done? Let's get on to like seeing all of it and not just that one part. So that's also like, as a candidate, knowing the cadence of your talk and making sure that you can kind of cover the topics you want to in the time given to you. But then also the interviewer, like, they should probably not let you like give you too much rope to hang yourself with.
Rein you back in. Yeah, that's great about painting a picture, like the whole picture of yourself as an interview, because I think that's what's memorable to people rather than just one particular topic. I know you talk a lot about communication skills and collaboration for applying during the application process. Is there a way that people can really make sure that they show that and make sure it comes across in like, so that the employers know that they are good communicators and collaborators?
Communication and collaboration, they're the backbone of any gig. So those skills can become a superpower when you're in a remote environment. So if you have a high attention to detail and you're a great writer, I like to think that those kind of level you up. In a remote environment, you can embrace those strengths, and they make you an even more concise communicator and a team player. When I like to think of like myself as a design project, when I share stories in an interview, I start with the problem, and then I will share how like the humans in that situation work towards a solution. So for example, like prior to having my first remote job, one of the problems I faced was running my own contracting business and managing like different vendors and clients and partner businesses across time zones on like really tight timelines and limited budgets. Like I had, it was funny, it was called Crispy Pixel. That's the name of the company. And like, I did not have very much money to like hire contractors and stuff. So I was working on very limited resources. But I was able to take those experiences and kind of package them up and pitch them in a way for my first remote job, like communicate them in a way that makes sense to somebody hiring remote. Like, look, I worked across different time zones. I may not have had a remote job at the time, but these experiences make me suitable for the role. And I can collaborate asynchronously. It's something I can do with managing requirements. So one is like writing and being able to communicate and collaborate through writing. But then two is just like packaging up stories in a way that like that resonate with a remote employer, right? If you don't have any prior remote experience, I'm sure there are stories in your life that you can use to highlight that. Like you're ready, you can work remotely. This is not just a special thing that only unicorns can do. Everybody can do it, but how can you tell that in a way that's really resonates with them?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think actually we're going to dive a little deeper into that topic in our next talk with someone who got their very first remote job at a company like at GitLab, which is a company that rarely hires people who don't have that kind of experience. So there's many ways to highlight that in yourself, even without being able to say you've done it before. So I would like to dive a little deeper into Microsoft and what you've been up to lately, especially with this crazy year that we're in right now. Almost over, but 2021 is going to bring new things and new changes for the working world. What changes has Microsoft made, and like with hiring remotely, and also do you know what's planned for the future of the company? Will you continue hiring more remote workers?
Now, I can only speak to like, again, the developer relations division, because that's where I'm at, but I've definitely seen more listings going out the door that are remote hybrid, right? So it's subject to a manager's approval, whether the role will be conducive to remote. And I know that Microsoft's official stance has been that like hybrid, like meaning not every role will be remote, and we're going to always probably be that way. Yeah, like I think that now more than ever, there's opportunities within the company and in different divisions. I was looking at like Xbox games, and they have new positions up and stuff that look really exciting. And I'm sure that they would be more like open to hybrid roles. Like traditionally, that's not the way it would be. And this is at any company, right? Like you look at Amazon, you look at any of the big companies, they're all kind of shifting that way. But we're also seeing like 5 to 12% adjustment to the base salary, depending on they call it like the geo pay scale, which I haven't personally seen the actual real geo pay scale. I'm sure that's just an HR only like thing that they can see. So, and I even took a cut when I joined Microsoft. You know, you get your initial offer and they adjust your base salary a little bit, depending on your locale. So unfortunately, I think that's going to be a practice that some of the larger companies, I think some of the companies are going to adopt no matter what. There's also ones that just base it on San Francisco pay rate. Me personally, I think it's right to just, you know, we're not going to adjust it. It's like you get paid what you get paid. No geo adjustment. But
so has that been an argument within the company? Do people is it a point of conflict, like deciding whether or not you want to do that and how people feel about it? If you don't mind me asking.
I was talking to a fellow that we hired a couple of weeks ago about this because he was dealing with it, and I was like, I mean, it's a point of contention, right? Like that's a quick way to get somebody like disgruntled during the negotiation process. Like you've negotiated your salary, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, we're going to adjust it 12% because you live in, you know, West Virginia or whatever.
Wait until the negotiations are over and then make that adjustment at the end.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, negotiations are always a little bit like, you know, tick for tack. Like they're like, okay, do you need relocation? You're like, no, I'm going to be remote. And they're like, oh, well, now we have to adjust your salary.
So do you, like, what happens if someone lives in San Francisco or a very expensive place with an expensive cost of living, and then they move to somewhere that's really affordable? Do they take a cut?
I don't know the specific answer to that, but I'm almost assuming yes. Like there's probably going to be a cut because you have to report into HR, right? And they have to change all of your billing information, like where you're going to be taxed. So they know that you're shifting. And I wonder, you know, like I said, I haven't done it myself. I know there are team members that are considering doing that. So yeah, I think it's like kind of a new norm at some companies, and some companies aren't doing it at all. The other side of this is we've seen a bigger support from Microsoft for work from home environments. So, you know, they're sending machines to people's homes. They're giving you a stipend to get chairs and equipment that's going to be more ergonomic for you. So this is kind of all within that like workplace health. Get like a standing desk, that type of thing. So there's like a small allowance for that. They're also sending things like monitors. So I feel like that's pretty like status quo. That's and like I said, Stack Overflow was kind of the leader here for me. They had a pretty amazing reward policy. Like you would join and you could basically pick out your desk and you get an air-on chair and any piece of equipment you want. So
nice. So have things changed a lot since, I mean, you've been working remotely there since the start, but have things changed for everyone since they've gone home? Are you using, I don't know if you know about the other teams, but are they using like new, different software? Did you already always use Microsoft Teams, or how, was there an adjustment with the way you work?
You know, it's been awesome to watch the Microsoft Teams product team like really rev on features. So if anybody here is using Microsoft Teams, you know that they're like constantly releasing updates and like trying to lead in that realm. So even things like reliability of the platform have like drastically improved, right? We're not getting as many crashes. There's different features coming into the product. So we were prepared, like the team's backbone and infrastructure was there. But like, you know, it changed everybody's way of working. Like we had so many members on my design team that were in the office and they no longer have that social connection. You know, they went into the office because it was a hub for creativity or like co-working. Like they were sitting right next to the developers and they could go over and maybe jam on something in particular. And now that just had to move to a remote environment. And that's been one of the pieces of my role, has been to help team members adjust their workflows. You know, it's not just taking your standing meetings and propping up 30-minute calls all day for everybody. Kind of like, you know, loading up somebody's schedule and just hoping that it works. It's more nuanced than that. How do we move some of the work that you were doing in the office space to an asynchronous space? How do we leverage the chat channels to encourage thought sharing, to encourage communication, and not just DMs happening back and forth between people? And so that, you know, there's no visibility. It's not like you have something on a whiteboard and somebody saw it and they can come over to your desk and ask you about it. Now that's happening in a DM. So you're getting less cross-pollination of ideas, not more. So my role is really like, how do we continue like talking as a design team? How can we set up some good practices, like based on what I learned at Stack Overflow and from all my great peers at Stack Overflow? Like I said, it was really a team thing to learn from each other and how we would do things in a way that would, again, like get the best ideas out the door. That's what we're there for. We're there to build the best product we can and get those ideas in the shared room. So.
Yeah, I love seeing how everyone's changing. I guess kind of a forced change, but I think it'll be for the better afterward, because even when you have some people remote, they won't be excluded from those conversations, even if people are back in the office, because you'll have these new ways of communicating too.
Yeah, and I think that I love that because you have, a shared channel history, you have recordings of things that have happened. It's there for even people that are joining the team later.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a real strength of remote work. There's like this natural shift towards like heavy documentation.
Yeah.
And it's always persistent, or it's asynchronous and comments are left in, a Teams chat instead of just in that meeting room. And so, yeah, when I joined Microsoft, it had heavily that same feeling that I felt at my first contract job or my first agency job, which was like, everybody's in one main office, and then you're just a solo designer out here in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, and you get left out of a lot of conversations. It's not that way anymore. There's not just conversations happening in the Redmond office. So a really nice shift for me. Like you said, it was forced. This is not normal times. People are under like high levels of stress. And they've also adjusted like work schedules. So all of the, managers have kind of pulled back on deadlines and work orders and things like that. And you've also seen a shift of the events. So you have like Microsoft Build, you have Microsoft Ignite. Those had to go online almost overnight. They had to shift their whole narrative. Those were massive, initiatives across the world. How do we take that energy and bundle it into, just like a hangout, right? It's just a video conference.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to see how, especially with events too. At first they were just canceled, but now everyone's starting to put them back on because they know it's either this or nothing at this point. Yeah. So speaking of how Microsoft is hiring remotely, I guess you've always been hiring remotely. What are the 3 or more? What are the key soft skills you look for in a person who's seeking a remote design role?
Communication. We mentioned that one and touched on that one pretty deeply. Like, both written and oral, that can be demonstrated in so many ways. Blog, or like Steph gave that amazing talk before this about blogging. I deeply believe in like serendipity, like creating a serendipity vehicle for your content, whether that's design content. For me, that's Dribble. Like I put my Dribble profile out there and I got so many leads when I was contracting. That's how I got my job at Stack Overflow. I think that putting your work out there is the best thing you can do for yourself. Putting your thoughts out there, even if it's just having a Twitter presence, sharing interesting things you found, man, that just tells us so much about like where your mind's at, how engaged are you with the industry. And there's just like, there's so many ways to kind of show off who you are on the web now. I love that. It's such a good, strong signal. A second one would be just like autonomy and independence. And this might be shown, I think I mentioned like my time running my own like design firm and consulting. I think back on that and showing off that like I took it upon myself to have some autonomy and like independence, running my own business. Like that goes, even if it's a small little business, right? It still goes a long way in telling your story about like, you can work on your own. You are kind of like motivated to work on your own and get things done. You got to get shit done. Like that's the most important part about all of this is we're getting things done together. Self-awareness, like being aware of how your workday is going to impact other people's workdays. So we're working with time zones, right? And I had an amazing coworker at Stack Overflow he was from Poland, and he would adjust his schedule just so he could be in meetings. And he would be in meetings at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night so that he could be talking to us. And I think that goes a long way. And like it's humility. It's just knowing like to be a team player. And he adjusted his workday, right? So he was like, I love it because I can just spend my whole morning doing whatever I want and I'll work later in the evening. Remote work is wonderful in that way that you can just kind of adjust your whole schedule to how you want to work and get things done. As long as you're keeping in mind there are people that are still counting on you. Yes. And then transparency, like being transparent and maintaining a digital presence. I'm really big on this, like updating your status and making sure that people understand, like, by the way, I'm going to be out of the office from these times, or I work this schedule. Just like overly communicating. Yeah, I think that's like a key soft skill, like being a good over communicator to your peers.
Yeah, that's definitely a recurring theme. For the audience members who have attended every talk so far, you know that every single speaker listed communication as, if not their number one skill that they mentioned, it was at least the second one. So you know that matters, and managing oneself too.
Writing. So writing to me, like this is my personal preference. So there's a caveat here. Like writing is like amazing. I love things to be wrote down, and I also love them to be concise. And this is like a practice that we did at Stack Overflow, where at the top of a document, you would basically have a TLDR, like too long, didn't read. What is the TLDR of this document? Like, am I going to spend 20 minutes reading this thing and still have no idea what's going on? I certainly hope not. So like somebody should be able to wrap up a document they send you, right? Like, by the way, sent you a Slack message. Did you see it? No, I did not. Please put a TLDR somewhere on that. Like, give me a preview of what it's going to be about. And that's just like conciseness, being self-aware, making sure you're communicating to your team in a good way. I just love that. Like, there's all these little hacks, you know, that you can do in your workday.
Yeah, I love that tip for if you have a big piece of something to ask someone or share with them, just to do that little TLDR bit. I know I try to do that like in bold. If I'm asking my teammate for something, if it's a paragraph, I bold the part where it actually asks them what I want them to do, so that they can skim it and know what's happening.
I need this thing from you. Please do it.
Yeah, so they don't actually, so they remember to do it and notice that I'm asking for it as well. Yeah, those are great communication tips. I think everyone this year has learned a lot about that, especially if they're working remotely for the first time. So speaking of seeking remote jobs, and since our entire job search is online now, and I know people come to you sometimes, you go to them, what's the best way we can optimize our profiles, like LinkedIn and other online presence for a remote job search?
First and foremost, set up that online presence, right? Like, make sure you have, and I think that LinkedIn has caught on more. I wasn't ever a huge fan of LinkedIn, but I think it's definitely picked up steam as like a viable alternative to going to an office and interviewing or connecting at a regular social event. I use it a lot for like cold networking. So set that up, get it set up, and get it, you know, primed and looking good. And start with your resume. Like, while you're doing that, look at your work history and try to identify and elevate. Like, have you worked on teams that require external business partners, that require contractors? How can you talk about those stories in a way that would appeal to like a remote hiring manager, somebody that's looking at you for a remote role? And you can also look, you know, if that work history had any sort of virtual arrangement or partial work from home, you can spin that as like virtual, right? Like, put virtual in somewhere in the description, or like try to market that as like this role was conducive to remote work in some way. And then I'm taking this one from like all your classic, you know, Instagram influencers, but like, you got to manifest it, right? You got to like embrace remote work practices, start talking to others in the industry who are doing it, be around them. You know, the web right now, Twitter, LinkedIn, all these social spaces, there's so many Slack groups you can get involved in. Being in those social spaces now, that's the one place we have to network with people. Given like the COVID world we're living in, you can't go to a conference anymore. So like, do that. Like, this is a great time to seize that opportunity. There's a guy named Chris Hurd on Twitter. He has amazing remote insights. Like, if you're going to make a Twitter account and follow somebody, follow that guy, because he's like talking about remote work all the time, has great thoughts on it. You just never know who you're going to bump into when you get involved there. Again, back to like the serendipity vehicle, having like this channel for yourself to be bumping into people that might connect you. Yeah, and I just think right now is an amazing moment in time to seize a remote position if you're looking.
Do you have any specific tips for example, we have the networking feature here with like 5-minute video chat, speed networking, and we also have our Facebook group. What are your recommendations for just like sparking a conversation and actually making a genuine connection with someone this way?
I have been successful in contributing in Twitter threads Like I'll go and like I'll talk to people that maybe I haven't bumped into. I'll be like, hey, I'll actually say, hey, you need to say hello. Like probably you need to like introduce yourself a little bit. Like, hi, this is my thought on this issue. That's been cool. Like I've ran into so many people that I've never met in real life that way. I started interviewing people. So I will just reach out to people and like interview them and talk to them about their career path. You'd be amazed how many people are like totally open to talking to you about like their careers and like they're just going to talk about themselves. I love it if you kind of position it as like, hey, I would love to interview you, versus like I just want to grab a cup of coffee. They're like, it doesn't mean anything now, even because like we're remote. But yeah, doing interviews with people that maybe like you look up to, and you can learn something like, hey, I'll do like a 10-minute interview with you. That's a great way to network. Putting yourself out there, again, going back to just like posting your work in shared spaces. There's so many good Slack channels, like design Slack channels and communities around that, Discord communities, Slack channels. Like in my network is crucial. As I mentioned at the beginning, I have like a really trusted group of people that are way smarter than me and know so much about the industry that I look up to, and every day I learn something from. And I think that's always a place that you want to be. You want to be in a place that your mind's growing and they push me to be better. And I think, again, going back to my coaching metaphor, like if I have an athlete and I'm training that athlete, like I want them to be in an environment where they're inspired, and they're going to push themselves and be exposed to new ideas. And like, they feel like there's a vision for like where they're going to head.
Yeah, that's great. I think everyone here is probably very inspired as much as I am just in their job search right now, with all of your great advice. And as we wrap up toward the Q&A portion, what do you think people should put on their to-do lists right now, like their checklists of when they want to apply to a job, what they should do in advance, how they can plan for it, and also where do you recommend people find these jobs?
I think it's amazing to try and find somebody that is working remote right now and make friends with them. Like, try to reach out to them, find some people doing it and be like, hey, like, I want to talk to you about like what your day looks like, and really dig into that. Find kind of a, not really a mentor, but just somebody you can bounce ideas off of. And like, maybe they're on the lookout and they know of resources, that I'm not going to know. There's some amazing job boards. There's two in particular on GitHub. There's one called Remote in Tech. And then there's another one called Awesome Remote Job. They're just like GitHub repos that have like companies that are really remote friendly. Go on there, look if those companies interest you, look if they have any open roles, and kind of reverse engineer. Like, I see a role that I could do. It's just remote, and then kind of fit yourself in there. How does your puzzle piece fit into that? Mm-hmm. My wife actually has been looking for a remote job, and there's a place called the Mom Project. So she had like a extended leave of absence because she was raising kids. Mm-hmm. And the momproject.com, like they have some amazing resources for women looking to get back into the workplace. I would definitely recommend that for anybody. And then build your network on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever those social spaces are that your specialty kind of lives. And I'm coming from the design world, but maybe you're a content author. Mm-hmm. Maybe they live on Instagram, or a photographer, right? Those people live on Instagram. Like, go mix it up a little bit in those virtual spaces.
So where does the design world live? Since I know we have a lot of designers here listening.
Well, it was Dribbble. There was a lot of stuff happening on Dribbble. There was a lot of stuff happening on Behance. That's where, like I said, I made a ton of connections in the early days of Dribbble. Twitter, there's design Twitter. I'm a big Twitter fan, if you can't tell. Like I think that's kind of covers it for me. And then there's also so many schools popping up now. There's like product development schools that you can do. I think there are maybe even like discounted class, rates and stuff like that. And I'm sure there's cohorts there of fledgling designers that would be awesome to be friends with. So
yeah, there's so many online communities for things. Just start Googling and you will find communities that match your interests. And Twitter is a surprisingly good place for professional networking, even though it's such a funny, strange place as well. It's really great
I think one of the surprise groups that I've been a part of has actually been there's a 3D for Designers group, Slack group, and it's like refreshingly fun to be in because it's all like around training in 3D for designers coming from the design world. So check that one out. That's cool.
Awesome. So let's check out some of the questions you've all been asking. Now, out of this one might be a little out of context. This was near the beginning of the interview. Tina asked, was it async or sync? And what have you felt worked best? Not sure exactly specifically what she was asking, but I guess you can talk a little about how your team works and your communication.
Microsoft is like heavily email, so everything still lives in email, which was like really jarring coming from Stack Overflow. Jumping into Hangouts, we've been trying to shift things more async. So please go into the document and comment there, right? Or go into the Figma file and comment there. We're really heavily investing in Figma for all of our design work because it is so collaboratively focused. It allows the product teams to get in there and leave detailed feedback on very specific flows. So I'm like a huge fan again of like async once again, because like it's a evergreen, like you can always go back and look at what was said and why decisions were made. I love that.
Yeah, async really adds to just the documentation of ideas and things that happen too. So anyone can go back and check it out. Let's see. I have a quote. Someone quoted you. Oh, I recognize Ted's name there. I clear my throat with Capri Sun, the drink of champions. We'll have to put that on Twitter. All right. Bear with me as I find our next question. All right. What advice would you give to someone who wants to switch career trajectories into design with little design experience?
Ooh, that's a great question. There are such a massive amount of resources out there. I can't even tell you where to begin, but I think that it would be wise to find, once again, a mentor. Somebody that can kind of get you on rails so that you can stay focused on the things that matter. I again come from like a traditional design background, so I think it's really important that designers understand like foundational typesetting, like spacing, grid, all of the core elements of like visual design language. But we're even in this realm now where as a user experience designer, you have to understand things like philosophy. You need to understand like user behaviors. You almost need to be like a sociologist in some ways. Like, there's such a breadth of liberal arts background there. So yeah, if you're coming from a different career, I think that design is very conducive to that. Don't be afraid of it. I think there's so many product schools right now popping up that are training people to become a product designer. Find one of those schools. We had a junior designer come in from a product design school. They didn't go to school. They didn't go to traditional, 4-year degree school for product design. And they're a successful product designer at Microsoft. And they came from one of these boot camp schools. So yeah, I just think that having that mentor can really keep you on rails. You've mentioned Ted was in the chat. Maybe Ted will be somebody's mentor. Ted is great. Ted's amazing. There's just so many designers out there. If you get involved in these communities, that I think would be really open to being a coach or a guide to you.
Yeah, I think these online communities that you mentioned too would be a great place to just find possible mentors and connect with people that you can learn from. So let's see what's next. Also, people want to know if they can reach out to you for career advice, and if so, how? Maybe you can drop a link to your Twitter or something else or whatever you prefer.
Absolutely. I would always encourage, like, I'm always open to talking. LinkedIn actually has become like a real favorite of mine because it just gives me such a good like understanding of where maybe that person's coming from. If they have their LinkedIn profile set up, I can go and like kind of check you out, and then we can talk on like with more context. Like I can dig into maybe your background a little more. So that's great. And then yeah, Twitter. I'm always active on Twitter. I love it. For sure, reach out to me.
What's your Twitter handle again? I can pop it in here. It's
just my name.
It's Courtny
Cotten. That's it.
Courtny Cotten. I'll still toss it in there just to make it easier for everyone. Let's see what else we have. Huge fan of Microsoft. My dream job would be to work on the Xbox team. And do you know if there are remote opportunities for Xbox? I guess you briefly mentioned those jobs. Are they hired?
I'm always watching. Yeah. Because I want on that team too. So if you find one, let me know.
Yeah, you two should connect just in case you can help.
But there's different studios inside Microsoft Game Studios. So I tell you what, there's probably some teams that are not going to want to be like heavily remote, and they're going to try to get back at the office as soon as they can. So look at the different games, like the game studio portfolio within Microsoft, and go kind of backwards from there. So you can like, I want to work for 343 Industries, right? That makes Halo. Can I start connecting with people there and looking at job listings that are 343 Industries? That would be my advice there.
Awesome. So we have from Christina, this is a good question. Curious if Microsoft often employs remotely from Europe or just in the US. I'm curious too, does Microsoft employ remotely, globally, or just within? I
actually worked with like 3 team members that are not US citizens. And one of them was working from India for a time during the visa stuff. So very, very compliant there. And I think very like mature in how they handle visa sponsorship and getting people from other countries to work for us. Now, there may be, I think Steph mentioned this in her talk too, there's a high likelihood that we have an office somewhere in your country because it is Microsoft. So there's so many satellite offices. That may make it the process a lot easier for you too.
Yeah. Do you have like time zone restrictions for every job role, or like if someone doesn't want their visa sponsored but they live off in Australia?
We have in my team actually half the engineering team is in Shanghai, and so we're around the clock.
Yeah.
There's not really any limit there. It's just, again, it goes back to transparency, communicating your work schedule. We'll make it work if you're the right person. So we have PMs that are in China as well.
Yeah, I guess just finding a little tidbit of overlap time there to communicate. You always have some synchronous time in your team.
And then also, I will add that there's a massive network of contractors that work at Microsoft. I never knew this, but Microsoft employs so many contractors that you could contract for Microsoft and then become a full-time employee that way too. So that's a good way to kind of get into a product team and prove like, hey, I can do this, and then you get hired in.
Yeah, so that perfectly leads into the next question from Alejandra, who is asking, what is the best way to apply for a job at Microsoft? She said she's tried a couple times through the website, but wasn't successful.
Yeah, I think that if you ask anybody, they're kind of disappointed with like some of our application processes, but it really helps to have somebody on the inside. I know that is like, that's tough, but like if you can figure out people working on the team that you are in or wanting to get into, and you can open up a channel of communication and somehow that benefits you so much. Or if it's a team you have no way of knowing like who the hiring people would be, you can reach out to a recruiter, and there's always recruiter profiles like that you can find on LinkedIn, and they can try to channel you to the appropriate hiring manager within that division. So like, again, somebody asked about Xbox. It's like, if you know you want to work for 343 Industries, get on LinkedIn, try to find a recruiter at Microsoft, and they can probably try to start back channeling you to the right people.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Get those humans in the mix rather than just tossing applications. And
don't just do one recruiter, because they don't talk to each other all the time. And they may be totally different teams or divisions or countries. Talk to a lot of them at the same company.
Yeah, and remember, if one person ignores you, it's not personal too. Like, people often don't respond to things from strangers too. So just reach out to a bunch of people. Don't be discouraged, I would say. We have our remote work calls and meetings typically recorded, I'm assuming, at Microsoft. What if you don't feel comfortable being on camera?
We have members on our team who don't, particularly feel comfortable, and I think that that's perfectly acceptable. You just want to make sure that you communicate that with your manager. I think there's a lot of things that we miss through doing like a video call. Even we don't have body language. It's harder to tell when to inject yourself in a conversation. So like, having some facial cues is better than none. But I would say that, like, again, Microsoft is one of the most inclusive companies in the world, and we try to make those like appropriate like adjustments for if you have a particular reason you don't want to do that or feel comfortable with it.
Let's see. Next question from Alicia. Building a design portfolio can be challenging sometimes. Any advice or tips on how to get more portfolio-worthy projects? Like, for example, they say that I've been freelancing and consulting on the side, but often I get a non-disclosure agreement or clients that just flat out say no, that I can't use my work for them in my portfolio. That's a really good question.
I had to work around this when I jumped from an office job to a remote job. And the only way I approached it was I had to pick up side gigs. That's why I started my side company, is to be able to do side projects legally and not get a huge tax rate. And I only took on projects that excited me and I thought would get my foot in the door. Things that I thought would be a great portfolio piece. So that's the way I did it. I don't know that that's always the right way. Some people advocate for like doing you can do unsolicited redesigns. There was a famous, I can't remember his name. There was a designer several years ago who did a redesign of like Microsoft Office, and he ended up getting hired by that team. It was totally unsolicited redesign, but it was amazing as a portfolio piece. So yeah, you can try to do some side projects. Like I said, I have mixed feelings about that because I think that it infringes a little bit on like work-life balance. If work is not your life, you don't want to do that all the time. You don't want to have to be just sitting there working on side projects, but at least, having one side project that is in an area that you're really passionate about and can show off that passion in a way that you are proud of. It can become a really compelling story piece for your portfolio.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And also a common theme throughout this event already, just finding those little passion projects for the side that they show your abilities.
I also found those passion projects would come up from jamming with other people on their ideas. So, I had a friend that had an idea for like a learning startup. And he's like, I want like basically, a game that kids could play and teachers could like go in and set points, basically Clash Dojo. Like, I want to design this and like, let's do it as a proof of concept. Maybe we don't ever build it someday, but like, let's design it. Let's like come up with the product. And it's a cool portfolio piece. It's just like, we designed it in a way that did all the proper design process steps, and you can show that off.
So do you think
nothing's stopping you from working with somebody else?
So do you think this is a different, this leads to our next question. Is there a difference in the way you, like as a hiring manager, would view real world portfolio samples done on the job over like versus personal projects that you do as a hobby? Do you prefer real world samples, or doesn't matter?
Of course, I love a real world project that like attaches to like a objective and key metric, right, within that company, and it is like millions of dollars made because of these design changes. But not all of us are going to have that, and that's okay. Some of us are going to work like early days. I worked on small projects that were tiny iterations of like little controls. I don't know that if they moved the lever that big, but at least I could tell that story of working on that team and what that experience was like. Sometimes all those small little projects add up into one big one that you can talk about. Like maybe it was like the story of adding feature controls to Stack Overflow Enterprise. I don't know. But I would certainly say that I value like real work experience if I'm looking for a mid to senior level role. If it's a junior product role, I understand the world that you're coming from. I understand that you don't always have exposure to big, high profile projects. And honestly, like if you're coming in as a junior and you've had these big swings and you're not like applying at a higher position, I'd kind of scratch my head, like what's going on here? So yeah, I think that it's just all dependent on the position you're applying for, and then how you're telling those stories. Because I think that certainly some personal projects can be very intense and really compelling and awesome and deep thinking and totally valuable. There's nothing that says that they're not valuable experiences.
See, we still have a few questions to go over. I know we're just at the end of our hour. Do you have a few extra minutes to answer questions, or do you prefer people maybe reach out to you? Or all right. So next up, I see Alicia says, I'm about to open a Twitter account again. Nice. You can follow Courtney, follow arc.dev, ARCDOTDEV. Gotta push our Twitter out there. So let's see. What are some good places to find Discord or Slack channels to join, and any in particular you'd recommend?
I believe there's a Twitter list, maybe of both of those. There's like a design and tech Twitter list, and that's where I've stumbled upon some of the most most of the Discords and Slacks has been like the design and Twitter. There's like just a list of people tweeting about things. And like I said, I kind of stumbled upon them. I'm sure there are, I bet there's a GitHub repo somewhere collecting them too. I'm sure there's probably somebody out there in GitHub like that's compiled them and put them in one nice little place. I'm going to link out to I think I mentioned a couple of different job boards too, and I'll link those.
Yeah, I think if Courtney's up for it later, we can try to put a tweet out there with some of your communities that you recommend or things you've heard of that are good. See, someone posted Chris Hurd's Twitter. That is a fun one to follow. I follow it as well. I'll give you a chance to get that link in there before we get to the question. So how would you go about finding a mentor? I know we discussed this a little bit. Yeah, like where would you look and how would you approach them?
I was actually combing this event for some of the people that have presented before me, and I'm gonna plan on reaching out to them. This is my personal tactic. I'm gonna reach out to them, just see like if our personalities kind of mesh. Like, are we? I feel like I gotta kind of be friends with the person in some way. Like we got to strike a chord in some way, and then it's gonna be a little bit more of a rich experience. So that's hard to tell, right? Like on just sending a cold message, but you can try. And there's nothing wrong with like just sending out cold messages to people and being honest and upfront about your expectations. Look, I'm looking for a mentor, would love to work with you. And if you don't know somebody, if you can't do it, then I would love to talk to somebody that could, if you have any referrals. I just be forthright with it, be upfront, and be a human. You know, it's harder for me to respond to somebody that's like trying to be super anonymous. So if you're like hidden behind a profile picture and you don't use your real name and stuff, like I'm a little bit more like, is this a real person or not? Right.
Yeah. It's a great point. Just making sure people can see you, see the real you, see your humanity too. That you aren't just some Twitter bot. Our next question is from Iskra. I hope I say everyone's name correctly. Hi, Courtney. Thank you for doing this talk. I am an aspiring software engineer looking at the LEAP program, or LEAP. I don't know which way you like to say it. I'm curious, what qualities are you looking for in an apprentice if you were to take one on for your own team?
An apprentice. That would be, it's like I'm a magician.
I like that.
What qualities? I think it would be the same that I'm looking for in an athlete. Like you have to be excited about our mission, right? I coach collegiate athletes and I coach them in a number of events like sprints and pole vault. And I always go back to like, they have to have like the passion to put in the work. I can't work for them. You know, I can build the best training program for them. I can get them lifting. I can get them stronger and faster, but they have to go on the track and do it. Like every single day they have to do it. So I think there needs to be that you got to show that drive and that passion for what we're trying to achieve. And we have to share the vision. Like it's not just me doing it and it's not a push pull. I'm not going to smack you with a stick. I'm not that type of coach. Like there's no like me pressing you. It's just like, this is the plan and this is how we're going to attack it. And if you don't, you're only letting yourself down. And so I think that like, yeah, the passion for the cause and just like being willing to learn and being in that growth mindset are just so important for me to have a good enjoyable coaching experience with the athlete and with the designer.
Great point. Let's see. We have from Tina. How is the work-life balance at Microsoft and when it comes to handling deadlines that may not be realistic?
Deadlines aren't so much a problem because you actually in the quarterly planning, you will give estimates on your work. So you're usually looking at a backlog and you're working backwards and you say, okay, I can get this much work done. This is how long it's going to take. So you kind of control your own destiny. But there are times that it's been a lot more crunch. So we at Microsoft, and especially developer relations, there are some really key events that happen twice a year. Microsoft Build and Microsoft Ignite. And so for us, those are like our time to show off features, time to get things out the door. So we're very conference driven development. And there are times like the final month leading up to, Build. I remember this year's Build, it was like I was working, the 2 nights before because I liked the project I'm working on and I want it to be successful. It's not necessarily a knock on productivity. at Microsoft, because the rest of the time it's wonderful, right? Like I knew that it was going to be a crunch time, and it feels appropriate. Sometimes you're in a marathon, and sometimes you're in a sprint. Sometimes you have to work really hard, and sometimes you don't. But it makes it all that much more enjoyable when you're on a team and you're working with people that you don't want to let down.
Yeah, I think that's normal for even the teams with the best work-life balance to have those crunch times. I know that from experience as well. All right, let's see. We can cover a couple more questions before we wrap up. So many are coming in so quickly. Let's see. We have, are there any team face-to-face meetings for team building purpose of building trust? Like say between the Shanghai team and you meeting. That's a great idea. You should do after the pandemic, meeting halfway in Hawaii for co-located meetings once in a while.
Yeah, that's a genius idea. I'm going to pitch that to senior leadership.
I hope you get to.
Because we need better Capri Suns. But yeah, there are like traditionally there are meetups. There aren't any right now, and there haven't been since February. So it's going to be like, you know, the great celebration at the end of Star Wars when the Empire's defeated. Like everything's going to be jumping up and down in Hawaii, I guess, on some tree. But yeah, like traditionally we'll have those like shared experiences, shared meeting spaces where like everybody can come together that's remote. You get to meet, you know, all 600 people within dev relations. It can feel like a conference at a company the size of Microsoft. It's like your own private conference, and it's a lot of fun.
It sounds like fun. I know a lot of remote teams do that, like once a year get together or something. And it seems
Stack Overflow used to have the most epic get-togethers, like team meetups every year. It was incredible. They'd fly everybody out to some like really cool location, and you know, have events planned and stuff. No real work happened, right? Like it's like you go and watch somebody talk, but yeah. Great time.
To make it sound like work, but still for fun, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure these will all be doubly epic. Now that everyone's got that travel bug, just sitting in them all year or two long. All right, let's see. We have a question from Britik. Are design projects that the client didn't end up building good to have in a portfolio? And also for developers, do incomplete projects make good portfolio stories?
Sorry, I was doing a very important response in the chat. Can you repeat that?
Sorry, wait, let me scroll back up to it. I'm losing it here. All right, are design projects that the clients didn't end up building good to have in a portfolio? Also for developers, do incomplete projects make good portfolio stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are awesome stories to talk about, especially if it's really cool. Like you should definitely talk about like a project that didn't ship. I mean, there were multiple times I would put things in my portfolio that never, maybe they weren't envisioned exactly. Like I would share like, here's the vision I had. This is where my mind was at. You don't have to kind of shackle yourself to how it was finally shipped. You can maybe touch on that, but you can say, look, this is the original vision. This is what we got to, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, maybe they made it better. And the same thing with like a dev project. It could be like you did a project and it failed miserably, but you learned something. That's the story in that. That's the rich part of it, is like, did you learn from it and did you grow from it? And can you talk about that? Going back to like the storytelling and being authentic, like own your like failures and use them as growth and an opportunity to talk about growth and how you face hardship and failure.
Yeah. Sounds like more important is not necessarily the outcome of the project, but how it helped you develop in your career and everything you learned from it as well. So let's close this up before I close out with the most important question of the day, of course, which happened in the chat, but I'm going to say it out loud anyways. What is your favorite Capri Sun flavor?
Pacific Cooler. Always and forever.
Now, on that note, I just want to thank you all for joining, and thank you so much, Courtney, for being here today. And remember those tips from Courtney: be yourself, be authentic, and
be excellent to each other.
Be excellent to each other, and we'll see you again shortly. Thanks, Courtney.
See ya.